Welcome and apologies for the delay. Technical stuff, in the immortal words of James Taggart. We couldn't help it, but we managed to help it, and here we are. So the topic today is the defeat of the hopes that something would change in California and the defeat of the call to recall the current governor, Gavin Newsom. Now, we discussed the other day the politics of California, so we're not going to repeat these things, but mostly we want to discuss to see what is the significance of this by-election and what it means for the future, because I think it shows some interesting stuff about where politics are today, and also what is the situation with the Republican Party and why it might be worse than most people might think. So, Jonathan, let's start with did you think that Newsom could lose? So are you disappointed, or do you see it strategically as well? We always expect that. What's your reaction?
Well, my first comment, and great to be with Nikos and great to be with our community from all around the world today. My first response actually was something that I heard Caitlyn Jenner, who, as I understand it, was also running for governor of California. She said something that actually echoed back to something that Dr. Yaron Brook has said many, many times, in that people get the candidates, they get the politicians they deserve. There seems to be a fantasy among many of us who want to see a change in the culture that all we need is that just one right politician, that charismatic politician who comes in and somehow changes everything. It's almost like it's a fantasy. And I don't know, maybe even Miss Rand had that fantasy herself. I was hoping to share a couple pieces of video here. Maybe Dylan behind the screens will let me do that. But Miss Rand went actually and campaigned for Wendell Willkie back in the campaign, the presidential campaign, I believe, of 1940. Here's a little bit of Wendell Willkie actually speaking. She went and campaigned for him. She was so interested in politics at the time. And of course, she supported Barry Goldwater back in that early 60s election as well. So I have that enthusiasm, and I can understand why people can get that enthusiasm about politics, but I'm finding myself much more probably like Miss Rand was towards the end of her life, thinking that we get the politicians we deserve, we get them because of the culture we have, in this fantasy that, just the right politician, Larry Elder or anyone else comes along and changes anything. Didn't happen with Ron Paul, didn't happen with any of the candidates we've seen over the last, in my lifetime at least, and it wasn't going to happen this time around in California either. California gets the candidates and the politicians they deserve. And it's because of the culture more than anything else.
The thing with California, though, is that it's been doing so badly that you would expect that this would be a vote so the average Californian would say, look, I see with my eyes that my state or some central parts of my state, San Francisco, LA, they have been deteriorating. And we need to do something about that. So that's what they were counting on the Republican side. Now, what I find interesting is that the reaction, the vitriolic reactions to the Democrats, to the person of Larry Elder. So he's someone who is not, let's say, an insider of Republican. He also has this quasi-libertarian vibe. He also has this vibe that says that, look, I'm not, let's say, the old face of the bigoted face of Republicans or whatever every Democrat has in their mind. But he was treated as basically a Trump Jr. And this is how Democrats are going to play it. They're going to play it that every Republican who is raising his or her voice, they're going to be put that this is an intellectual child of Trump. Now, why is this very, very significant? Because look what conundrum the Republicans are in. If they have a boring Mitt Romney guy, what is the loud, noisy base of the opinion makers of the Republican movement going to say? Boring, CAC, elite, establishment guy. If they have someone who enthuses the base, there's zero chance that he's going to have much of influence on the people who need to switch votes for the Republicans to win. So the Republican Party, in a way, it's like this person who is hooked in very strong drugs. The strong drug will give them the boost, but it's bad for them. And anything lighter than that is not going to do it for them. So that's what I see. That's what I see from Larry Elder's campaign. And I'm wondering if this is what we're going to see. So Do the Republicans need, in terms of, let's say, tactics and politics, do they need a new Trump? Many of them think that the answer is yes, but this is not going to get them far. Do they need a figure which is the anti-Trump, but the significant core of their basis, they don't want anything that is not, they don't give them this excitement that Trump gave them. So,
well, and who cares, Nikos, who the person they have, the figure, if the ideas are the same as Trump and the same as Newsom's. And by the way, thank you to Mary Eileen, thank you to Robert, thank you to Sammy, to Mary Eileen for all your contributions, your super chats. Mary Eileen makes the point that, you know, politicians follow the culture. They don't lead that. We've seen that over and over again. And I think to that point, Nikos, I mean, today's radical politicians on the right, if Larry Elder is that, I mean, it's sad that we have to cast politicians now that we're casting a Vegas nightclub, you know, kind of boring, not a lot of razzmatazz. I mean, it should be about their ideas, right? It should be about, that's what should be motivating. But, you know, anything that's fundamentally opposed to collectivism, to statism on any level, it's simply out. It's not seen as radical. It's not seen as exciting. You know, I wanted to share, if I could just briefly, you know, Miss Rand endorsed Barry Goldwater, people might remember, who, you know, this alone is worth the price of admission.
That extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice.
Extremism in the defense, I mean, that was the Republican candidate for president back there, you know, in 1964. But, you know, today's so-called extremist Republicans, in my opinion, Nikos, on the right, are just Democrats in other clothing. They're just different types of collectivists, different types of statists. So, you know, there's nothing, I think, for me at least, as an objectivist, as an American, to get behind in terms of politics, because they're all different sides of the same collectivist coin.
I get that, but here's my two slight objections. The number one point is that because everything now is so much about politics, and because the state has so much play in one's life, who is leading and who is in charge matters. Think about how many people have left California in the last years. This is, okay, we could say that the root is in ideas, but the expression has been bad politics. So bad politics have actually influences in people's life. And as someone who is currently in a country that was destroyed by bad politics, and that is Greece, I can definitely resonate with that. The other thing is that Larry Elder is, you can't get in the current climate a better politician, someone with a better program like that. School choice, get rid of regulations, get rid of these ridiculous plans about green energy in California, go back to neutral, nuclear, go back to gas and oil in California. So the fact that this guy is facing this vitriolic opposition says something. And when I find interesting how the CNN in their main editorial covered today's results, do you know what's their first main point? Their first main point is that this was, quote, strict pandemic policy gets a big win. Newsom aggressive actions to slow the spread of the coronavirus, the same restrictions that helped spur the recall election, got a significant boost on Tuesday night. So here is how, let's say, the establishment, here's how the mainstream opinion makers are making what they're making of this victory. Proving to Democrats across the country that strict pandemic policy can be good politics. Now, that's scary. That's like this, that's a problem. So the fact that this is we talk all the time about how bad Republicans are, and maybe because in our ecosystem we have more people who flirt, let's say, with being too lenient with the Republicans. But if you think what is the mainstream, let's say, opinion, and what is the mainstream line that says that, well, this is a thumbs up for a strict coronavirus policies, that shows you that, yeah, we can say, well, yeah, politics are downstream from culture, but politics are this. Politics can have an effect in our life now. So I'm just mentioning that politics matter. Culture,
sure, and especially when something like healthcare is now so inextricably linked with everyday life, where, of course, when something health related comes up, politics now sets the stage. And, you know, Nikos, just the fact, as we've talked about over the last number of years, that it was just a given that governments, state governments, local governments, federal governments were going to regulate and distribute the vaccine and all that. We're going to manage that whole thing. That was just a given. It was almost never a sense that there was going to be any type of a free market solution. So that's where I'm holding out to. And, getting some interesting chat about, people think, oh, maybe some objectivist intellectuals are too permissive, too hard, to this or that. I mean, I'm always ready to try to facilitate and encourage any elected official who can come up with even a quasi-capitalist solution, come up with for any type of malady like this. And the vaccine, which would be a great one. But who out there on any side of the aisle, Nikos, had any element of a pro-capitalist solution to anything to do with the pandemic? None that I'm aware of. So there's just no one to get behind on either side of the aisle these days.
Well, to be honest, if I were in California, I would be very, very enthusiastic with this campaign, because again, it's about your quality of life. So quite often you have to vote for self-defense. So for example, when the radical left, quote radical left, was in government in Greece, I could understand people who voted for the liberal centrist, although they're holding status as well, because they said, look, it's an act of self-defense. I'm losing my house because of taxes. I am up to here. So I get a breath, I get some, so I kind of get it. But again, look, so listen, for example, what was the first tweet by Gavin Newsom when he understood he wins. Tonight, California voted no on the recall and yes to science, women's rights, immigrant rights, the minimum wage, the environment, our future. We rejected cynicism and bigotry and choose hope and progress. So it's very interesting that now officially, like everyone on the Republican side is considered anti-science, and the Republicans here have a lot of soul searching to do, because this not only has to do with their religious views, it has to do with their anti-vax views. Women's rights, it has to do with how abortion is now on top of their agenda. So part of this is the center left being vitriolic. Part of this is what the Republicans have brought to themselves. And it would be interesting if you look from a futures perspective, and if you ask yourself very, very calmly, who is the biggest benefactor of the modern left in the United States in the last decades? And the answer is one. The answer is Donald Trump. Trump, and this is not to say I'm not Trump bashing. I'm saying what objectively happened. Trump has not given a narrative to the Democrats while he was in office. Trump has given a narrative to the Democrats even now that he's out from the office. So I don't know what would be the solution to that, but if you think about it in a very strict, in a very kind of cynical way, is the left better off after Trump, or is the left weaker after Trump? The answer is the left is way, way, way stronger after Trump, politically and culturally and in terms of narrative. And if someone thinks that we're oblectivist, please explain to me why the left is weaker now than it was 5 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, and quickly, Nikos, we don't want to get into a whole, discussion necessarily on Trump, but, from my perspective, before Trump, capitalism, free market capitalism, still had some respect in American politics, particularly among so-called Republicans at the time. I was around during the Tea Party movement in 2008. I spoke at innumerable Tea Parties. You had Republicans talking about wanting to get rid of Social Security, getting government out of their life. You had a Republican talking about pro-capitalist messages, certainly anti-tariff, etc. In my opinion, Donald Trump obliterated that. He took out the capitalist element, the individualistic element from the Republican Party. And the results speak for themselves: losing the House, losing the Senate, losing the presidential the presidency, and also losing any chance that capitalism had. I mean, capitalism, Nikos, these days in America, I mean, it used to have a seat at the table before Trump. It was seen as, maybe a little on the fringe, but it was seen as, well, this at least is the tradition of the American, the capital. Now capitalism is like the same as what Lyndon LaRouche is, if you know what that is. It's like it's seen as this harebrained, old, that not even the Republicans support capitalism anymore. That's the damage, unfortunately, that Donald Trump has done long term. As objectivists, we're the only ones that I'm aware of, even the so-called libertarians, we're the only ones that could present that consistent, moral, practical argument for why capitalism is American, why it's right, and why it works. And before Trump, at least some Republicans would make would be able to get it out. Not anymore.
Yeah, and one last point on the same thing on Trump. So I understand that someone's going to say, why are you so obsessed with Trump? Trump is gone. So what I'm saying is not the usual criticism of Trump when it comes, his ideas. We've done this criticism a lot. What I'm asking you is, in terms of establishing a political hegemony, instead of paving the ground for the victory of his ideas. So you could say, for example, Orban is very bad, but he has established something like a political hegemony in Hungary. Trump is bad, and even if you're a conservative, in terms of what he has built and what he has left behind, he's also bad in that way. That's why I'm saying, okay, you cannot understand the case of why Trump is a mess ideologically. Okay, but can you see that the Trump movement has also been a mess politically? It has also been a mess in terms of creating what we would call a hegemony in politics, where you control the narrative, and even if you have the media and all that stuff against you, you find a way to be in, let's say, to be on the driving seat. And the Trump never did that because the Trump didn't know how to do it. So this is where we find ourselves. And again, before you start, oh, you're so obsessed with Trump, ask yourself this question: if the ideas that you believe, that you think that we are leftists of your or whatever, if the ideas that you believe are in a better place today or 5 years ago, answer this sincerely, and then you can be as angry as you want with us.
Yeah, I mean, I just remember the beginning of the American Tea Party movement in the mid 2000s, which changed a lot. At least for a little while, it did change it a lot on the board, culturally, politically, and it started with people basically saying, "Look, I'm sick of being my neighbor's keeper. I am not my neighbor's keeper. I didn't take out a mortgage I couldn't afford. I'm sick of I am not my brother's keeper." And it was that type of a real emotional explosion, if you will, that gave birth to Nikos, to your point, some change, some at least lip service to some capitalist ideas. Those don't exist anymore. So for me, my focus is supporting organizations like the Ayn Rand Center UK. Thank you, Sammy. Supporting the Ayn Rand Institute, other objectivist organizations, because tomorrow's politics are being written now in high schools in the UK and high schools in America. Students of yours, Nikos, young kids who are going to learn these ideas so that when they're working for an assistant or on the hill somewhere, they're going to say, gee, maybe we should try this capitalist idea just the same way that Martin Anderson did, right? I mean, this is the story. Martin Anderson was an associate of Ayn Rand's, worked with Ayn Rand's, and then when the moment came, he said, hey, Nixon, why don't we get rid of the draft? And that's a big reason why the draft was abolished in the US. So get them while they're young. That line from Evita, get them while they're young. That's where our focus should be right now. Forget who's ever running now, this cycle, or even 3 cycles from now. Get them while they're young.
Notice though, not get them while they're young in terms of how the conservatives or the left is seeing it. We're going to get to them first and brainwash them. No, just show them the alternative. Tell them, look, there is an alternative, and you have the mind and the judgment to think. But anyway, that's all I had to say about this. Again, strategically, I think it's very interesting to see how the Republicans recover, not from yesterday's defeat, but how Republicans solve this conundrum. How you can find someone who can mobilize, who can wake up these emotions that Trump did without the toxicity, let's say, of the message that's going to alienate people who are not in that core.
Quickly, this is my term, but it seemed, my understanding is that Miss Rand used abortion, at least in a few examples, it seemed to me almost like a litmus test, if you will. Again, that's completely my words. Reagan is the best example. Miss Rand opposed Reagan's presidency because of his stance on abortion. So Nikos, just big picture, the fact that so many conservatives, you remember those so-called defenders of capitalism, are now going backward in time. They're following the Taliban back to these unbelievable violations of people's, i.e. women's rights to their own bodies. They're going back to this backward religious way of treating people with their own bodies. To me, it's condemning them to, I don't know how many more generations of obsolescence, as they should be. They're moving backward in the way that they treat people in their health, certainly women in their bodies. And what's happening in Texas now is it's a shame, and any American, let alone any Republican, who would get behind that.
That's all. And again, for people who are wondering, oh, why are you saying this about Trump? And they say, why did you say he had this effect on the Conservative Party? I'm throwing the question back to you. Tell me what Trumpism left behind. Tell me what Trumpism has left as a capital for a political movement or a cultural movement. And when you answer that question, I might be able to tell you that, yeah, I'm wrong and you're right.
I just fixed it.
That's right. Anyway, so what's up?
We'll see you on Clubhouse. It's time to break.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'll miss Clubhouse today, but I'm sure Jonathan is gonna be good company. Also, last thing, not least, Yaron Brook is in town, ladies and gentlemen. He's in London. He's gonna be in London today. I'm bad with maths, but I'm not sure if you can make it to. Yeah, you can still make it to his today's thing if you are in London. He's doing something with LSE High Society. Tomorrow and Friday and Saturday, he's doing events every day. Go check the ARC UK social media or check Yaron's social media and check him out. We're talking about live events. We're not talking about Zoom stuff. So that will be it. And we have the cutting edge today at 9 p.m. UK as well. Oh yeah, so much stuff with Anwar Sadat UK. Sorry, I've lost track, and that's it. Okay. Anything else?
No, thank you so much for your support. You are helping us build a worldwide community of people interested in objectivism, fans of Ayn Rand's, students of objectivism. So as they say, we are all in it together, and we're delighted to be with you on our journey. So we'll see you on Clubhouse, and we'll see you again for the Daily Objective.
Bye-bye.